Well, it is a rather broad mandate because you know that UNESCO, which stands for the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, has been created almost 65 years ago to what our founding fathers called building peace in the minds of people. It was after 2 devastating world wars, and it was felt that it was only through education, in trying to impact on what people think, that you can really change or at least build the opportunities for peace. So the mandate of my office in New York is first and foremost to interact with all the membership of the United Nations, at present 192 members, and to basically to advocate, the same way as a mission of, say, Spain or France or Canada to the United Nations, to advocate for some of the global goals and objectives that we have, which is building peace through offering an education of good quality, through protecting cultural diversity, which I'm sure we will talk about, and through allowing people to have access to information, the information they need to make the choices they need for their lives. Well, language are very, very important, and I think we just now start to recognize globally how important languages are. Why? Because they are truly a window, a finestra, you would say in Catalan, a window opening on people, who they are, what is their identity, how do we connect to each other. And this is fundamental as we now see that it is not enough to give people's economic opportunities, even employment opportunities. We live increasingly in a multi-ethnic, multicultural world. Here in Barcelona, in my own country, in Canada, in Montreal, I mean, we are very multicultural and multi-ethnic. And languages is fundamentally expressing our own identity as an individual, but also as peoples, as collectivities. So it is very central. You know, it is always a bit of a difficult question because the United Nations and the General Assembly proclaims a theme for a year, whether it is peace, whether it is the year to protect the environment, or in this case, last year, the languages. Because we feel that it is through the proclamation of a year that we can truly impact on people, we can talk about the problems, but also about the opportunities so that the general public can do something about it. So it is maybe a little bit, it is somehow too soon to truly evaluate its impact. But one thing that we see is that increasingly people feel that languages are important. We can be a global society. In fact, even more so because we live in a globalized world, the importance of our roots, of who we are, therefore the languages and our identity are important. And you don't have to choose. You know that here in Catalonia. We know that in my country, in Canada as well. You can speak more than one language. But it is very important because through language, you can preserve the memory of a people, our own history. And this is what we have the most precious to give our future generation, our children and our children's children. So I think that last year was a good opportunity for people around the world, for governments, but also more importantly, for peoples, for collectivities, for the media, to talk about the possibilities that today we have with new technologies, with mobile technology, with translation devices, so that we can speak more than one language, and at the same time we can even preserve better our cultural identities. You know, it is a major task. It's a global task. And I think we have to be ambitious. But again, I think that what we feel in the United Nations and what Director General Matsuura meant was that this was the beginning of something and not the end of something. And as we close the year, on 31st of December last year, I think we took stock of a lot of new initiatives and mobilization effort. But more importantly, we have to look forward and we have to see how are we going to protect, for example, maybe half of the 6,700 languages that exist today, that if we're not careful and if we're not very conscious and take very practical steps, we are going to lose half of them in the next 20 years. Now, this is a whole memory of a people. It would be as tragic or even more as losing some extraordinary monuments. So I think that it was not an end in itself, and what Director General Matsuura said and meant is that we need to mobilize ourselves so that we can continue on a path that is more conscious. We have to be more conscious of the need to protect languages. Well, yes, definitely. You know, as again, if you allow me to come back to the globalization aspect, we all know that now we live in a globalized world, that we can have online on the internet, we can have somebody through Skype who is in a village in Bangladesh. Now, this gives us extraordinary opportunities, but at the same time, it also allows us to be able to, while we do business on a global scale, and we have always done business on a global scale. Don't forget that Marco Polo ate his first noodles in China and has imported old culture from China. So business has always been a vector of knowing people and the interchange that we get with it. Now there are new opportunities with the modern technologies, but also with the fact that we are traveling a lot more, we are maybe more curious to know about other cultures. And for the business, we need to be sensitive to that. So, for example, and I'll give you only one example, we in the United Nations talk about dialogue of civilization. Here in Spain, the concept of alliance of civilization is very important. Well, as an example, Coca-Cola company, a huge company that has far more employees than even the United Nations itself, over 170,000 employees around the world. Now, Coca-Cola came to realize that a vast part of its clientele, well, a large part, is from Muslim origin, is in Muslim countries. And during Ramadan, I mean, there is more than, of course, the prayer is very important, but also charitable acts to be good to your neighbor, to your family, to people you don't know. And therefore, Coca-Cola has adapted its whole strategy of marketing and sale in countries where there is a majority of Muslim population in order to be able to participate, to sponsor collective activities, etc. during Ramadan. So this is one example of being sensitive. The business world, a very large company. I could give you many other companies as well. IBM, another one. Facebook right now is employing hundreds and hundreds and maybe thousands of people in India to translate Facebook into Hindi, because there has not been any entries yet. So I think that business should be a lot more aware. This is still rather a new area. We used to translate, I mean, business used to translate instruction manual. You would buy a camera, but would not adapt the marketing strategy, the branding, the message, and more importantly, try to understand better the cultural diversity of the markets around the world where they operate. So that is an area for the future that we need to be a lot more conscious of. The House of Language, I think it's wonderful, and I'm so thrilled to be here in Barcelona and to have the opportunity to go and see the site where the House of Language will be built. Ever since I became aware, maybe a few years ago, or 2 or 3 years ago, of Linguamon, and now what you are doing since last year, I've been more exposed to it and encountering some of the colleagues of Linguamon. I think this is an extraordinary project for two reasons. One, because of course it does protect or aim to protect Catalan as a language, as a very important language of culture and communication. But also because, likewise, as there is a similar project, although different in Brazil, it opens up a whole window to all the languages in the world, ultimately. And so the House of Language that will be built here in Barcelona, I think will be a very unique opportunity for of developing further the preservation of languages, but also allowing more local content on the internet. Right now, the internet is maybe a little bit more limited, not only in language, but also in where it comes from. So we would hope that through the House of Language, there will be opportunities to truly protect and preserve, but also use more the languages around the world. Well, the challenges I did mention, there are, well, roughly, we think, 6,700 languages right now. For example, UNESCO, the organization that I represent, has published just this year a World Atlas on endangered languages. Of course, the challenges are to protect those. Imagine when there is one person, there are some parts of the world where you have 1, 2, or 3 people who speak indigenous languages. Now, some of these people are rather aged. I mean, they are not young anymore. If we don't protect that, because very often these are oral languages also, there may not be any script, or there is not the ability in the younger generation to use that script. And I think so this is extremely important. When you lose a language, you use a whole library, I mean virtually a whole library, and you use a whole memory of a people. The opportunity, the challenge is to preserve those languages, and also again to realize that there is no opposition between speaking our language and speaking it very well and learning some other languages too, because through language you learn other cultures. The opportunities, well, I mentioned when we talked about the new technologies and preservation of languages. Mobile technologies today allow us to make a quantum leap forward. There are villages around the world, areas where people never had the opportunity to have electricity, to have a telephone line, and now all of a sudden, through mobile telephony, for example, even without the internet, you can access the Library of Congress and libraries around the world online. Imagine the opportunities for a child who is in a village in Uganda, or who is on an island in the Pacific, or who is here in Spain. So I think that the opportunities are just almost endless. Only the technology will create the barriers, and we advance all the time. And because of that, I personally, and us at UNESCO and in the United Nations, feel that, well, first of all, we congratulate you, Linguaman, for your extraordinary vision of the future, and we are looking forward to work with you and partners such as yours, because we feel that really there are the endless possibilities will enrich our collective culture, but also us as individuals. And at the end of the day, this is about understanding each other better and about building peace for the people of the world. So that is truly an end that we feel is so precious and so important.